Remember when Microsoft used to make their own smartphones with Windows? They had a lot of different models, but they sadly stopped making them. So why did it fail and why did almost no one buy a Windows phone? Because it had amazing features. For example, this one is really cheap when it was released. And this one has a 41 megapixel camera with optical image stabilization and a large sensor. And this one you can connect to a dock and then it turns into a PC. So let's start by looking at the Lumia 550. It was only 100 euros when it got released, but that didn't mean it was a bad phone. Because Windows Phone works great on low-end hardware. They cover up the slowness of the device by using nice animations. And it was actually usable, unlike a lot of other budget phones at the time. It has a 5 megapixel camera on the back, which doesn't sound impressive at all, but even in 2024 it can still take some decent images, because it has pretty good processing. It also has a very nice manual mode, which you don't see on a lot of other phones. You can quickly adjust the shutter speed, ISO and white balance, but also the focus. And it has a very close focus distance, so you can get some really nice macro shots with it. So that's pretty impressive for an 8.5-year-old budget phone. But then when you actually start to use the phone, you notice why not a lot of people bought a Windows phone. Compared to the older Windows 8 Mobile, Windows 10 Mobile felt a bit buggy. And that's not only on this cheap phone, but also on their more expensive models. But Windows 8 was very stable and no one bought that either. So the buggy software isn't the only issue. It also has the Microsoft Store, which doesn't have a lot of apps on it. So YouTube is missing, but also banking apps, Google Maps and other social media platforms. So if you want to use those, you have to use the browser, which is very annoying of course. But just because of those things doesn't mean that the phones were bad. They still had some really nice features. For example, the keyboard was really nice. The typing on it was always fast, easy and accurate. And it also had this joystick that you could use to move around in the text. It had built-in Office Mobile, so you could make PowerPoint presentations, but also Word documents on your phone, which back then iPhone and Android didn't have. Most of them also had a removable back cover, so if you didn't like the color of your phone or the back of your phone got scratched up, you could easily replace the back cover. And it also allowed access to the battery, so if the battery life wasn't good on your phone anymore, you could quickly swap it out with a new one. And most Windows phones had OLED screens, which worked great with the dark mode, because this phone had dark mode before iOS and Android. And dark mode is much easier to the eyes compared to light mode. And Windows Phone looked completely different compared to iOS or Android. Instead of having a home screen where you could swipe left and right to see your apps, you could scroll up and down. And you had these live tiles that give information about the app. So the weather app icon already gives the weather information to you without the need to open the app. And after taking a photo with your flash on, you could adjust the flash later in post, so you could make it brighter or darker. It also had some interesting photo editing apps built into the phone. So for example, the ability to get a pop color, or get a blurry background, or a tilt shift effect. I'm also a really big fan of the design of Lumia smartphones. For some people it might look very boring, but in my opinion it looks nice, clean and minimalistic. And yes, the plastic does feel a little bit cheap, however plastic doesn't break easily, and like I said before, you can easily replace the back of it. But let's take a look at the Lumia smartphones that could turn into a PC. Those were the Lumia 950 and 950 XL. The idea in my opinion was amazing. Why would you need two devices if you can just have one that can do it all? And it also cuts down on e-waste, because then you only need one device with a single processor. And it is of course cheaper to just buy a phone that you can also use as a PC. It also keeps all your data on one device. So if you take a photo on your phone, then you will automatically also have it on your PC, because your PC is your phone. However, the execution of it was sadly not that good. Let me show you why. But first we have to connect them. You have to connect the Lumia to a dock, and then you can connect the dock to a monitor. The dock also has USB ports on it, so you can connect a keyboard, a mouse, but also other accessories like hard drives or a microphone. Once we have connected everything, you can see that it looks like you are using a PC, with the taskbar on the bottom and the start menu on the bottom left. However, it makes it feel like a real PC, but it isn't actually a real PC. It doesn't allow you to install real programs and only allows some apps from the Windows Store, and not even all are compatible. For example, Skype doesn't even work on here. Luckily it does have the shortcuts though, so you can quickly Ctrl copy and paste, but also the volume controls on your keyboard can work, and when you press the Windows icon it will open up the home screen. It also has the basic mobile version of Office pre-installed, so you can actually make PowerPoints with this or type Word documents, and that still works pretty good actually. But sadly, when you open an app it will open in full screen and there's no way to multitask with two windows side by side. And you can definitely feel that it feels very limiting because it's only pretending to be real Windows and not actually Windows. And because this phone is old, they don't update it anymore, so the browser is outdated. So a lot of websites load weird or don't work anymore at all. So what can you actually do with the Windows Phone in 2024? The first thing you can use it for is as a camera. Like I said before, most of the Windows phones still have a really nice camera. And you can for example use it as a second camera angle. The Lumia 1020 had a large 41 megapixel camera, and the Lumia 950 also took some really nice images. But that doesn't mean that the budget phones are bad. For example, here are some shots that I took with the Lumia 550, which is a budget phone. And because these phones are so cheap, it makes for a good cheap camera. And a lot of Windows phones also have the manual control, which is really fun to experiment with. The second thing you can use it for are some basic things, for example as a torch, but also as an alarm clock. And it still works as a media player device, so this can be YouTube. Keep in mind that YouTube is very slow in the browser, but you can also load music on it and use it as an MP3 player, because all Windows phones have a headphone jack. And if you are someone who doesn't want a smartphone at all, with social media or other apps that distract you, then this can still be a pretty decent option. Because when you compare it to other phones, it's much easier to type messages on a Windows phone than on an old Nokia phone. And it still has a camera that is good, unlike these old phones. After the Microsoft Lumia, Microsoft didn't make any new Windows phones. However, a few years later in 2019 they did announce the Surface Duo, which was kind of a phone but not really, because it had a dual screen with a weird 4:3 aspect ratio. The camera on the Surface Duo wasn't good at all and it ran Android instead of on Windows. They actually made a second generation of the Surface Duo, but after that no phones were announced from Microsoft at all. So will they ever make a Windows phone in the future? I think probably not. But it was still very fun looking back at them in 2024, and I still kind of miss them, because the Metro UI design of Windows Phone is also now gone in Windows 11, and Windows Phone had features that some other phones didn't have at all.